Machiavellian intelligence or our technological dominance and so on. Okay.
So the Kindle article is about cultural evolution. I guess what impressed itself on me through this paper was that kind of the hallmark, if we're talking about the hallmark of the human species as intelligence, this unique form of intelligence, then that intelligence needs to be robust and flexible and able to change with changing conditions, so it's subject to its own sort of evolution. So this paper is looking at how that happens, how information is transferred, which is really just a fancy way of saying how do we learn.
That's good. I'm glad that you put it that way. It really is just, a lot of this article is hard to follow and the theory is over our heads, but it's really just a fancy way of talking about how humans learn.
Yeah, and how our learning process is able to change.
Yeah.
But he does define for us cultural evolution as the population level patterns of ideas, behaviors, customs for which there is measurable variation, and it's subject to social transmission, selection, and drift. So he outlines two different types of cultural evolution: demic,
Either way. Yeah. Demic.
Which would be cultural variation based on basically survival and reproductive pressures, or cultural selection, which is different trait adoptions and abandonment rates. And that's the one he's really more interested in. How constructive learning is that drives that process of cultural selection. So he gives us 4 theories: situated learning, activity theory, practice theory, and distributed cognition. And a lot of this is highly anthropological to me, so I'll probably end up skewering a bit of it, but I can give you my best shot.
Yeah.
So situated learning is where we got this idea of the community of practice, and that's where individuals learn by engaging with others in a particular activity, and that's how you learn that behavior.
This is, that again, it's a fancy way of talking about something that should be much more straightforward. One way to get a better grasp of this is to just come up with some examples, I think, which is a good exercise for also getting you to think about what you might do your papers on. So what kind of examples could we come up with for a community of practice?
Maybe a lab in a department.
Okay.
If you have your advisor and you have your cohort.
Yeah. Even this class or the program that you're in, it's a community of practice. It's not just you consulting books and your teachers for information. Information and theory and all is not all that's being imparted in your programs of study. A lot of it has to do with just observing how people behave in an academic and professional setting, right? And how to just know where to get resources rather than actually just learning new information. What else? Any other communities of practice?
Gymnastics team, sports team.
Totally, yeah. Sports teams. Anything else besides sports and academics? Yeah.
Maybe a church or something?
Okay, good. I think so. And one thing that's interesting, I think the article at the very end cites a guy who studies religion and differentiates between religions that are more doctrinal in nature and religions that allow for more diversity in people's experience and values and so forth. But yeah, in general, a religious community gets together on a regular basis. They read from the same texts. They engage in the same rituals. Reinforce certain values and ways of thinking, and build relationships. Any other communities of practice?
Any organization, whether it's a sorority or a fraternity, people like that, they always get together. They have their rules that they follow, stuff like that. It's something that they're working towards as
Would a family be considered something?
To some extent, yeah, and some might say, well, we also need to think about collectivities at a level beyond the family, like a neighborhood or you know, when a bunch of families belong to the same church or organization or something like that. But families are also where, at least in a lot of cultures, individuals are, their primary developmental niche is within their family day-to-day routines. Right? School.
Just, like a high school, if it, maybe not if it's a 5,000 person high school.
Good. I think one of the examples that's given in here is like an apprentice situation of tailoring, right? Learning how to produce a certain artifact.
The culinary school that I went to, so everybody for pastry and culinary, we ran a restaurant through the school. So essentially we would cook and that food would be served to the public. So I think that's kind of learning the industry, but also learning the techniques.
Cool. Interesting.
I could almost argue that just existing in a culture, like, so if you're not alone in the room, but like out and about, that you're practicing dealing with other people, just that you don't know. So you're constantly learning from one another just by observing. Either it's etiquette, either you're observing them and making judgments about them, not necessarily bad, but just, I don't know, I feel like we're constantly inputting information into our brains, and that could be a practice of inspiring.
Good. So yeah, I guess it's hard to find humans who are not engaged in a community practice, and that's the point where we're the species that forms communities of practice and shared values and norms and behaviors and so on.
And if you isolate yourself, you lose your ability to do that. You need practice to do.
Okay.
Activity theory, these great phrases, mediational triangle,
Oh yeah.
incremental plane. The triangle expresses the effects of tools and artifacts in the environment on the activity of the subject in relation to an object being worked on. So,
I know what you're feeling. Like, I wasn't too happy with the way that section was presented. It wasn't very clear.
So basically you're learning about the significance or meaning or whatever a specific object or practice is, and certain things in the environment shape how you perceive that practice or thing or object. I guess that's what I took from it. I'm not really sure that means anything else.
I think that I can move us forward here and save us a little time by saying exactly what the author says, that all of these are sort of variants on a common theme, right? Part of the goal of the author in this paper is to bring these different but somewhat overlapping and similar sets of theory that have emerged over the 20th century together for the first time, and give you, well, one of the goals that we get, I think, from the reading from Downey and Monday is that we don't necessarily need more theories to explain cultural learning and niche construction theory. We almost need like subtraction of theory. As soon as we have too many theories that are saying variations on the same thing, and that doesn't necessarily help anybody, let alone undergraduate students, develop knowledge that's going to push forward the field of neuroanthropology. So the goal, I think, is to sort of distill common takeaway points from this article, and I think that they're, for the most part, summed up best in the section on situated learning, and not so great in activity theory, not so great in practice theory, and then the distributed cognition section again is, I feel, more straightforward and easy to understand, and again, saying much the same thing.
Yeah. So I guess my big takeaway from this article is that, information isn't a biological trait or a genetic trait. It's not even a material entity, but it's such a huge part of culture and one of the distinguishing characteristics of the human species. So if you're trying to understand how humans exist in the world and how change occurs, then you need to understand how information flows and how it's learned and transmitted and changes.
And again, that core message that gets repeated in different ways, that the structures of knowledge transmission that include other people, artifacts, books, and other means of recording information, these are not just ways that we adapt to the world, but they actually change the world and become the environment of adaptation for the next generation going forward. So this is the circular core of developmental or niche construction theory, that our ability to modify our environments to create sets of symbols and practices and artifacts are how we adapt to our environment, but also how we change the environment to which future generations are going to adapt. The other takeaway that I wanted to point you to in the conclusion of this article is in that first column of the conclusion, about halfway down, where it says, whereas the effect of cultural learning on cognition is well recognized by all of these theories that have just been reviewed, the effects of cultural learning on neural structure are relatively unexplored, and that's the sort of frontier going forward that people are interested in charting and exploring. So we can sit here and talk a lot about how development and experience in a community of practice changes our values and our behaviors and our perspectives on the world. The next frontier for people who want to go there is to actually show at the level of neural architecture in the brain, in the body, how things are actually changing by developing a specific community of practice or niche. Okay. Let's see how, I know we just took a lot of time. No, that's okay. I feel like we needed to do this for this particular set of readings. This is the last real chunk of theoretical stuff that we're going to deal with in this class, and now we're going to transition more going forward into case studies, starting with addiction next week. But why don't we take a brief, very brief break, and we'll just pull up Steph's video. We'll look at that, and then we'll come back to our other discussion leaders. Okay? So use the restroom if you need to, or don't go anywhere if you don't have to.
Oh, this is Mike Gunger, and he's a pastor, and he's been doing talks about marriage. This is like an hour and a half talk about marriage and how to have a successful marriage and why women and men think differently. But this is specifically about women and men's brains.
Men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each them. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right, now men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is, the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box. We pull that box out. We open the box. We discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes. Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everybody. It's like the internet superhighway. Okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. And she just loves it. Okay? Now, men, we have a box in our brain that most women are not aware of. This particular box has nothing in it. True. In fact, we call it the nothing box. And of all the boxes a man has in his brain, the nothing box is our favorite box. If a man has a chance, he'll go to his nothing box every time. That's why a man can do something seemingly completely brain dead for hours on end. You know, like fishing. Now, they've actually measured this. The University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago did a study and discovered that men have the ability to think about absolutely nothing and still breathe. You know, they've connected all the wires and stuff like that, watch the brain activity, and all of a sudden, I think he's dead. Huh? Yeah. Women can't do it. They can't do it. Their minds never stop. And they don't understand
that's good. Good. Okay. Cool. Okay, so briefly, it's good to laugh at this kind of stuff. What's going on here? Obviously, biological reductionism, right, of man-woman differences. You could also raise the critique that, what if, would somebody in a different culture think of men and women being different in the same way? Would they localize those differences in the brain, right? The way that this person does, the way that we often do. Yeah. One thing I randomly, I picked up a book that someone had discarded in the hallway today from 2005 about a whole book about women's brains, written by an MD, a woman, and New York Times bestseller, one of those kind of popular science books, explaining women's brains and what's special about them, and how they change over the life course, and also on the surface of it, very biologically reductive, and not talking at all about how culture can change values and perceptions and behaviors and so on. But the very first line, I opened up the book, the very first line caught my attention. It said that men and women's genetic code is like 99% the same, right? Just like humans and chimpanzees, 99% the same. And so it's, again, raises this question of how can difference be generated by, how can so much difference be generated behaviorally when genetic code is so similar? And a lot of that has to do with epigenetics and upregulating of different hormones at different times and so on. But you can't discount the role of specific communities in the way that we socialize men and women to behave in certain ways. And so, any other reactions to this video?
I think it's funny because like what he says is totally true from my experience, by the way that women's brains work and men's brains work. I mean, that's a big generalization, but I mean, that is like a pretty accurate description, I think. But also, I think the fact that there are labels essentially about men's brains and women's brains, like, just emphasizes the difference. And so, or it exacerbates the difference. So there might be a difference biologically a little bit, but I think when people put a label on the difference, it makes them sort of identify with it, and then it goes farther and farther and farther until like they're considered to be totally, totally different, when in reality there are probably some differences, but it might not be as extreme like in other cultures, for example, that don't have that identification with the big differences, so it's probably a lot different here in this country than it is in somewhere in Africa, for example, that has a totally different lifestyle.
Cool. All right, thanks for that stuff. So let's get to our discussion leader, number 2, and that's Taylor. We've had a chance to discuss a lot, obviously, of the readings. What do you want to add in terms of what interested you?
Well, what interested me mainly in this entire chapter was only was the chimpanzees. I guess from the research of C. Savage-Rombach, that the encultured chimpanzees. Because I watched that thing about her chimps when they were helping her cook. I don't know if anyone saw that. Well, I mean, despite the fact, I talked with a zookeeper in Cincinnati this summer, and he was like, that was just insane. Who would give a chimp a knife? But aside from that, I was like, oh yeah, why would you get, you've seen like chimps like go crazy. But aside from that, it was just so interesting to kind of to have seen that and to
watch a chimpanzee become encultured like that, because it's like the beginnings of us. Like you, like in theoretically, you could, I guess, kind of start your own evolution of chimps to humans if you really worked hard at it, I guess. And like made sure that they were all, kept in a place, and then humans were dictating everything, and to watch how they became encultured like that. And I don't know, I just love watching chimps make fire. Like that is just like a highlight of my day, to think about a chimp doing that, because that's like one of the major things that gave us like a start, was to control fire, and to think about that, and think about her cooking and being like, I don't remember the chimp's name, but like, hand me the celery, and I was like, celery, chop, chop, chop. It's chimp. But that interests me the most out of that chapter.
Okay. Cool. That's a really
The
good,
social aspect of it, of the chimp.
that's a good thing to pick up on.
And then actually out of the article, I don't know why, I can't tell you why, but the Russian,
Yeah.
I liked his I don't know why, I liked his research. I read over it like 5 different times to like, maybe more than that, to get what he was actually going at, but I think it ties in because of the social learning aspect of it, collective learning. And then, because when I put it into, when I was looking at that triangle, I was thinking about kids in preschool, collectively learning together, and learning around something, because that's like what a lot of like that kind of experience is everyone's like around a puzzle, learning together, that tool, and so I just thought that was interesting.
It is like, let alone like the intelligence of chimpanzees, could you even get a group of them to stay focused on the same problem for an extended period of time like you could with human children?
They probably have to like throw their kids
and then, so what does these encultured chimpanzees, these chimpanzees who are raised by humans, what does that really teach us? What do you guys think? What does it say about the uniqueness or non-uniqueness of humans, I guess is what I'm getting at.
What was the first part of it?
Well, the chimpanzees who are raised by humans and who develop more outstanding capacities and behaviors relative to chimps in the wild, or who don't have close cultivation or scaffolding of learning by humans.
I think the biggest thing is that it shows that we're not super, super unique, because I mean, we obviously are. We're obviously very intelligent, but I'm just saying if we can teach non-human primates how to behave in ways that are similar to us, and even though it's primitive behavior, and like you said, they might not be able to focus on things for a long time, but the fact that they can pick up on things so quickly when they're in captivity, I guess, and they can learn sign language, they can do all of these things that we never would have expected. Like a chimp can chop up celery, like who would have thought that a chimp can do that? So the fact that they can do that and we can teach them to do that just shows that maybe we're not that incredible. I mean, we are, but like, we're not, I don't know, we're not the only species that can do cool things.
So that's, yeah.
Well, and like a lot of those studies in the language class or whatever, when those chimps are raised like that, they can develop diabetes and growth spurts, which normally they wouldn't have out in the wild. So being around like in human type atmospheres, they can gain problems that we have. And even Kenzie, was that the name? When was that okay, I'm gonna try not to remember things. Like when she was trying to teach the mom sign language and using the lexicograms and things, her child who was with her actually learned more than she did because it grew up like that, and she wasn't even like trying to teach him. And it was like more like we teach our children to speak and to use language. So
Cool.
I think it'd be interesting to see where we would be if we had some species that was more evolved than us jump-starting
Mm.
the evolutionary path, possibly.
Like an alien species.
Yeah, but just to think of like how non-human primates can go from what we would consider just average behavior to such in-depth behavior, like it would have been interesting to see if that, like, how and it may be interesting to see what jump-starting it means.
Well, before we move on, because we don't have a lot of time, let me just say that, think about this. Would these chimpanzees who are raised by humans who develop all these capacities and skills, would they be able to go forth and pass those on to other chimpanzees? Would any of those skills that they learned still be around 3 generations later? And the answer is probably no, which shows you that there still is a huge divide between humans and chimpanzees. The ratchet effect is a term that was introduced in the reading. There is, at least according to Tomasello, this other anthropologist, psychologist, there is no ratchet effect with chimpanzees. They can't build on knowledge. Humans can build on it. If you teach chimpanzees new skills, they're going to die off in a couple of generations.
But I mean, I guess my question is, how do we know that? Has there been a longitudinal study of chimpanzee communities? And like when humans first discovered fire, did they immediately pass that information on, or was it just they gave birth and their child saw the fire?
Good question. So yeah, there could be fits and starts in the human evolutionary trajectory where some things, got invented but didn't really have the social coordination to spread them, and then it took a little while. But the other question, I'll refer you to the literature. Check out and let's see if you're interested if it's actually been proven that that kind of stuff will die out. Okay. Our third discussion leader is Megan, and you're supposed to tell us what you didn't really understand.
Well, what I did not understand, or what made me really upset, is all of the theories, and we already discussed all of those, and I don't want to talk about them anymore because they make me mad. But
so you're a proponent of theoretical
subtraction.
Yeah.
Yes, very much. But a question I did have was on page 115 near the bottom. It talks about non-genetic information being a huge part of brain growth, and I was wondering how that is possible. Like, how does non-genetic information create brain growth? I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
So, let me see here. I think that all this is saying is that brain formation requires genetic information, obviously, but it also requires a huge amount of stimulation, information from social interaction from the environment.
That's all.
Okay, cool. Shivwangi, you're our number 4 student to talk about what you disagreed with or what somebody else might disagree with.
I thought one thing a lot of people might disagree with is like just the whole concept of evolution and origin of species, because of the like religious beliefs and.
Okay. Yes, I mean that's like a we're getting so deep into evolutionary theory without even questioning creationism versus evolution. It's true. So one way to move forward from that point is to ask, do you think that people who are creationists, anti-evolutionists, because of their faith and because of their specific cultural niche in which they're a part, their community of practice and belief. Do you think that some people could be converted to believe in evolution if people didn't think of evolution just in terms of changing species, but had a more sophisticated understanding, or if a more sophisticated understanding of evolution, like we're learning here, could be communicated, translated, or
What I think is that like at least in anthropology, I've learned that belief and hearing and all these different things are given a lot of importance, as much importance as science and all those things. And I mean, I don't know, do you think it's harming anyone by thinking that we didn't evolve from chimps or something?
Good question. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So like we tend to, anthropologists tend to respect the beliefs of other cultures, unless it's like right-wing Christians within our own country. Then they're like, then they're just to be ridiculed and become the enemy almost. That's a really good point, yeah.
Well, I was raised very right-wing Christian, and then stopped being that and started learning a lot more about evolution. And so it is definitely possible to discredit all of your upbringing and change to this. But I also read a quote the other day that says, I mean, it's just like a quote, but it says, evolution does not contradict the existence of a higher power. And so I think it's really important to remember that for people who want to believe in a higher power, or they do believe that there is some sort of higher power, that doesn't mean that things can't evolve. So I think a lot of people look at evolution as evolution is anti-God and anti any sort of religion, and it's pure science and no higher power exists, but we don't know. There could be some higher power, but that doesn't mean that we can't still be evolving.
Yeah, so there's the distinction between, like, if we want to talk about Christianity in the Bible, a fundamentalist reading of it, and as opposed to just believing that creation and a higher power that created the universe is possible, as opposed to believing that, you know, God created, you know, humans in His image, created the universe in 6 days, 6,000 years ago, or something like that.
I think on the idea of is it bad, and I hate to put like a judgment on it, but like the range. I personally hold the belief that getting too stuck in your own niche, no matter what it is inherently not good. Whether that's just a way of thinking, or you're just in an isolated community. Because I think part of being special humans is that we get to, we should think, we should explore, we should self-improve, we should species improve, and I think if you're stuck in anything, you are not helping that process. You're just staying stagnant, and I think that's not the moral evolution, that's not the... I think we should be able to self-reflect and then also move outside of ourselves, and that's the point of learning, and that's the point of exploring. I personally have a lot of extremely religious friends, and they've never known anything different. So they didn't like come to it in a holistic way. They just never had any other option, and so they're there. And same with people who are in scientific families who had no religious people in their lives and had come to their beliefs simply because that's all that they know. And I think that's not conducive or constructive.
Well, thanks for that. That can be our concluding statement. Since we're out of time. And on Monday, we have Susan, Lisa, and Abby, and Shivangi for the media presentation. No.
The antagonized my 85-year-old grandpa with evolution at Institute of Dinner Table.
not convincing each other that it's the same idea.
It's hard. Humans have been studying this development for like a long time, or that's specifically, because I know anthropology is hard to understand. Just to hear me out. That I could be class and have the people on the front. So that's not the science that I think.
That's why I eventually just.
Let me think
I
about
just
that.
saw it, I didn't think you were like.
Hold on, Taylor?
No.
Let me just give you guys back in a second.
I really like that.
Yeah, definitely. That has been a topic in this class before that the students take for their papers, and we'll also get to more of that in the class too when we talk about stress.
I mean, you said before 1 tonight would work for you, for people tomorrow?
3 to 5, right?
Tomorrow, Thursday?
Yeah.
I have my office hours tomorrow from 3 to 5.
Before one on
Did I also say?
Friday. I said on Friday.
Before 1 on Friday, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I'm just gonna come before one on Friday.
Thank you.
You're welcome to.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not like
there's
a
a topic
requirement.
and outline, you don't have to. We're
Okay.
just mainly letting you know that we're available.
Okay,
If you want to bounce ideas off or
yeah, I would,
looking for resources.
yeah, definitely. I was really interested, I haven't looked at, any of the stuff that you or Dr. Edwards sent to me. I know you both emailed me back when I was talking about Ellen Langer's book, and so I appreciate that, but I haven't had the time to look over anything yet, but I was really interested in that, I don't know, that sort of area and how meditation can help with that, so that is one thing that I'm thinking about.
Cool, yeah. There's some pretty good resources.
You just was asking about the article, I think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought you had to go.
yeah, you did.
Yeah, can I?
Oh,
today?
yeah, you can.
Yeah, thank you. I did and I can, all right. We're gonna continue on with your Johnny. Yeah, I mean. Well, the reason I was asking was because I didn't know if you had.
That's my plan.
Okay, well, you go ahead and do it then, 'cause I don't know what you're.
Your,
With the references.
I was just going to do what I did last
one of
week.
your,
With the stuff.
and that, I'm gonna make my RA apologize to your.
Religious.
I'll write it for you.
No, I've got some words for it, but there's not those.
Yeah.
It's like a B flat, E flat, B flat, C flat.
3 hours, like, all day. It started like cursing, it started.
I'll write it.
Yeah, I think I scared her. You're gonna find her and apologize immediately. That poor kid. Yeah. I saw her, like, I saw her today there. I was like, he's sorry, he will be. And she was like, it's fine.
It's the best class of the whole course.
No pressure or anything.
Just giving you a heads up.
Think about it. Awesome. Oh, yeah. About like when we did between us kids that we did so. We like, we put one right. We can get it ourselves. It's
happening? You know, I pick my kid up from school 2-3 times a week, and every day I get him, I say, what's happening, Ian? And he says, there's a meteorite colliding with another meteorite somewhere in the galaxy. So, right, buddy.
We had a satellite land on here.
What? Or comet, yeah.
No, the European space.
Oh, yeah.
They landed at something or other.
Yeah, we'll get self up so it can go land on the comet.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So what we're gonna start out with is the same meditation that Winston was going over last week. So how many of you remember? Yes. Who can describe it? Somebody had a hand up.
I am.
Yeah.
Saying
Saying I am. Right. So just focus in on the sound of the words. Right. And not on other stuff. And certainly not on memories of the past or worrying about what's happening in the future, right? Or about spending a lot of time labeling the things that are going on around you, right? Just keep yourself focused on the simple sounds. Okay? And it is sound, it's not just, it's not the meaning of the words, it's sound. Okay? So we'll do about 10 minutes of this. And it gives me a chance to use the meditation timer. Because I love the bells. It makes me really happy. Listen, it's real bells. All right, so you'll hear the bells to start, and then we'll go about 10, 11 minutes. And when you hear that again, we stop. actual chairs if you like. You can sit on your cushion if you want. So today is